The morning sun poured over the city like melted gold, catching on the mirrored surface of Meridian Enterprises and igniting it into a gleaming monolith of steel and glass. People moved like clockwork beneath its towering shadow. Executives in sharp suits, assistants with coffee trays, interns clutching folders as if their futures were printed on the pages inside. It was the kind of place where precision wasn't just a habit, it was law. And then the revolving glass door slowed. A pair of small hands pushed their way through, followed by the soft tap of scuffed black shoes on polished marble. Emma Harrison stepped into the cavernous lobby. Barely reaching the reception desk's ledge, the 7-year-old wore her best, her mother's idea of important day clothes: a blue cotton dress with little pearl buttons, and a white cardigan that still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. Her honey blonde hair was divided into two perfect pigtails, tied with faded pink ribbons. She looked more like she belonged in a kindergarten classroom than the corporate fortress now stretching above her. But Emma didn't hesitate. She adjusted, the heavy leather portfolio clutched tightly in her small arms, the corners worn and softened with age. Her mother's name was pressed into the spine in faded gold. Rebecca Harrison. Emma took a breath, walked forward, and stretched up on tiptoes to see over the reception desk. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but certain. "The receptionist." Diane blinked in surprise. She glanced around quickly, expecting a frantic parent to come rushing in, but there was no one. Just the little girl standing there like she absolutely belonged. "Yes, sweetheart, are you lost?" Diane asked, gently, her fingers pausing mid-typing. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment," Emma said, with a tone far too professional for someone her size, "with Mr. Alexander Reynolds." Silence followed, Diane's brows whereupon together. I'm sorry, what?" Emma stood straighter. "My mom, Rebecca Harrison, she had the appointment. She couldn't come, so I came instead." By now, a suited man walking by had slowed to listen. Another paused at the sound of the name Reynolds. The lobby began to ripple with a quiet tension. Like the first seconds before a storm, conversations hushed, heads turned, people stared. "That's not how interviews work, honey," Diane said slowly, gently, trying to keep her smile composed. "Your mother needs to be here herself." "She can't," Emma replied, her voice wobbling for the first time. "They took her to the hospital last night. She couldn't breathe. But she really needs this job." A wave of murmurs rose. Behind her, Diane looked helplessly toward a nearby security guard, then at the growing group of onlookers. "Do you have anyone with you?" Emma shook her head. "Just me, but it's okay. She told me everything about the job I studied." And then she placed the portfolio on the counter with both hands, as if it were the most valuable thing she had ever touched. Inside was her mother's resume, carefully printed and tucked into a plastic sleeve, along with handwritten notes, and at the very back, a crayon drawing of a woman in a cape labeled "My Hero, Mommy at Work." Somewhere near the espresso bar, someone muttered, "Is this for real?" That's when a tall figure paused near the glass elevator bank mid-conversation, mid-stride. The man's gaze landed on the commotion at the desk, narrowed. He took a step closer. His voice, cold and clipped, rang out. "What's going on here?" Heads turned in unison. Alexander Reynolds had entered the room. The air seemed to tighten the moment his voice cut through the lobby, a low, commanding tone that made conversations instantly cease. Alexander Reynolds didn't speak often in public spaces, but when he did, the room responded like soldiers. Snapping to attention, he moved with an unnerving stillness, the way a lion moves when it doesn't need to roar to prove it's king. Impeccably dressed in a dark charcoal suit, every detail of his appearance was tailored to precision. The kind of man who ran numbers in his head faster than most computers. The kind of man who hadn't been seen smiling in years, not since the day he buried his father and took over Meridian Enterprises. He was not the sort of man who paused for anything outside the strict confines of his schedule. And yet, he stopped now, his eyes locked on the small figure standing at the front desk. The girl in the blue dress. The one who dared to say his name out loud in the middle of a Monday morning. "Mr. Reynolds," Diane began, nervously rising from her chair, but he held up a single hand. "I asked, what's going on?" Emma turned to face him, shoulders straight, as if she'd been preparing for this very moment in front of the mirror that morning. Her pigtails swayed as she adjusted the strap of her backpack and stepped forward, portfolio still in hand. "My name is Emma Harrison," she said clearly, looking way up at him. "My mom was supposed to have an interview with you today, but she's in the hospital, so I came instead." Silence thundered in the room. Alexander's eyes narrowed. His gaze scanned her face, almost analytically, as if she were a puzzle no one had warned him was coming. He said nothing, but the tension in the room thickened with every second. The elevator dinged behind him. No one moved. "Are you serious?" he finally asked. His voice unreadable. Emma nodded once. "She's a really good worker," she said. "She'd do anything to give me a better life," and I heard her practicing answers. I remember most of them. A laugh rose awkwardly from a junior exec nearby, but it fizzled into silence when Alexander's eyes snapped in his direction. "And where's your father?" he asked, almost too quickly. Emma blinked. "I don't have one. Not really. Just Mom." That answer hit him harder than he let on, but his face didn't crack. "She told me once that he left before I was born. She said he had to choose something important, but he wasn't a bad person, just busy." The weight of her words seemed to echo in the space around them. Alexander's chest tightened for a reason he couldn't yet name. His fingers flexed slightly, then fell still. There was something familiar about her tone, her phrasing, even her posture. Something about the way she spoke with too much maturity. For her years. It gnawed at him. He turned to Diane. "Bring her up." Diane blinked. "Sir, I said bring her up to my office. She came for an interview." "Let's give her one." Gasps flared softly around the room. No one could remember the last time Alexander Reynolds deviated from his agenda, let alone for a child, let alone a walk-in. But he was already striding away toward the executive elevators. The hem of his jacket slicing through the air like a blade. Emma followed, gripping the leather portfolio like it held the fate of the world. And behind them, whispers ignited like wildfire. "Is this a prank? Who is that girl? Did you hear what she said about her father?" One of the senior VPs muttered. "That kid just bought herself 5 minutes of history." But what none of them could guess, what not even Alexander himself yet knew, was that this wasn't just a chance encounter. This was the beginning of a truth that had waited 7 years to be heard. And the man who ruled a city from the top floor of a skyscraper was about to learn that sometimes fate doesn't knock out sometimes. It walks right into your lobby in pigtails and a cardigan and asks for a meeting. The elevator hummed softly as it climbed toward the top floor. Emma stood beside Alexander Reynolds, her small fingers wrapped tightly around the strap of her backpack, her gaze fixed straight ahead. She didn't fidget. She didn't speak. She stood like someone who knew this moment mattered. Alexander didn't look at her, not directly, but out of the corner of his eye. He studied her, the neatness, the poise, the portfolio tucked under her arm like it was sacred. There was something unsettling about how composed she was, how she didn't squirm under pressure the way adults did. No nervous giggles, no tears, no fear, just quiet determination. He'd interviewed hundreds of candidates over the years, brilliant people, broken people, desperate people, but never someone like her, and never for reasons like this. The elevator chimed. The doors opened to a corridor bathed in glass and steel, with sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. A panoramic view of the city stretched beyond, but Emma didn't stop to admire it. She followed the CEO without hesitation, her shoes tapping softly against the polished floor. Alexander held the door to his office open, then gestured to the seat across from his desk. Emma climbed up carefully, her feet not touching the floor. The chair seemed to swallow her. "All right," he said, settling into his own chair, folding his hands. "Let's have your mother's resume." Emma opened the portfolio like a magician, revealing the final trick. Inside, along with the resume, were carefully written notes on lined paper, words in her mother's handwriting, strengths, project planning, multitasking, employee morale. Next to them, in colored crayon, were Emma's own additions. Good cook, very nice, super smart. Alexander raised an eyebrow, flipping through the pages. "She let you help with this?" Emma shook her head. She didn't know. "I just wanted to." His throat tightened for a moment. He cleared it. "Tell me about your mom, then. Why does she want this job?" Emma's voice was soft, but sure. "Because she's tired. She works 2 jobs and still has to sell things on Facebook to pay our rent. She said this job would change everything. That we could maybe have our own place someday, with a window that opens." Her words landed like stones in his gut. No flourish, no begging, just facts from the mouth of a child. "She's not just smart," Emma continued. "She makes broken things work. Our heater broke last winter, and she fixed it with a spoon and a hair tie. I don't even know how. Alexander leaned back slowly, watching her, but his thoughts drifted. A spoon and a hair tie. That kind of thinking. That was exactly the kind of mind he liked to hire. He looked down at the resume again, scanning the name Rebecca Harrison, and felt a faint echo in the back of his mind. The name scratched at something buried, something he hadn't touched in years. But the memory stayed foggy. Did your mother ever work for Meridian? He asked. Casually. Emma nodded. She said it was a long time ago, before I was born. She said it was different then. Smaller. That sent a shiver up his spine. Meridian had only been a handful of floors back then, a tiny firm with big dreams. Before the buyouts, before the IPO, before he became who he was now. Do you remember if she ever mentioned people she worked with here? He asked, trying to mask the shift in his tone. Emma nodded slowly. Just one. She said there was a man who used to bring her coffee, but he got really important and forgot about her. The breath caught in his lungs. Coffee. In the early years, before the corner office, before the press called him the Ice King of Chicago, he had been the intern who fetched coffee for everyone, including. He stood up suddenly and walked to the window, staring out over the skyline. The voice in his head whispered what he didn't want to say out loud. Rebecca Harrison. He knew that name. A face flashed in his mind, a woman with auburn hair who laughed easily, who always had paint on her fingers from doing art. Therapy on the weekends. They'd shared more than meetings and coffee. They'd shared evenings, dreams. A night he never quite forgot, and a choice he never quite forgave himself for. His heart thudded once, hard. He turned back to Emma. She was pulling something else from her backpack, a folded piece of paper. With childlike ceremony, she handed it over. I made this, she said, in case it helped. He opened it slowly. It was a crayon drawing. A tall man in a suit stood beside a girl with pigtails and a woman holding a briefcase. Above it, in bright letters, my mom's new job and the nice man who gave it to her. Alexander stared at it, and for the first time in years, the unshakable man of steel felt his foundation start to crack. He sat down. Hard. The weight of the past, the uncanny resemblance, the math he couldn't ignore it anymore. And as Emma sat across from him, swinging her legs and waiting for his next question, Alexander Reynolds realized something devastatingly simple. He wasn't just interviewing a little girl. He was looking into the eyes of a truth that might change his life forever. And it had just walked into his office with a crayon drawing and her mother's resume. Alexander Reynolds sat motionless behind his desk, the crayon drawing still open in his hands. The edges curled slightly under his thumbs, the bright colors bleeding with childlike optimism, so innocent, so pure. So utterly disarming. He hadn't looked at anything drawn in crayon in, God, decades. Not since his little sister used to leave sketches on his bedroom door to cheer him up. After their parents fought, back when life still had edges softened by hope. Now, everything he knew was straight lines and hard walls. He cleared his throat, but the sound barely made it past the tightness there. Emma watched him, eyes wide and patient, still, unflinching. So your mom used to work here, huh? He asked, voice quieter than before. Emma nodded. A long time ago. She said she had to leave because things got complicated. Did she say why she got pregnant? Emma said it with the bluntness only children can deliver. And the guy she liked didn't want to stay. Alexander's heart thudded once, loud and out of rhythm. He leaned back in his chair, tension coiling through his chest like a tightening wire. Suddenly, the corners of the office felt too sharp, the air too still. His mind was spinning. Could it really be her? Rebecca Harrison? She had worked in operations when Meridian was still a two-floor startup trying to claw its way into the Chicago tech elite. They'd spent long nights planning rollout schedules, arguing over product development, laughing to heart over cheap pizza and instant coffee. She'd been the first to call him dreamer, not as an insult, but like it meant something rare, special. They had a brief moment, intense, unspoken, the kind of bond that simmered beneath the surface without ever being named. And then one day she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. He assumed she left for another company. Life moved fast back then. The pace didn't allow for sentimentality. He never asked, never looked, until now. Now a girl with her smile and those same fierce, steady eyes was sitting across from him, clutching a portfolio like a lifeline. Emma tilted her head. Are you okay, Mr. Reynolds? You look pale. He tried to smile, but failed. I'm fine. Just thinking about the job. Yes, he lied. She reached into her backpack again, pulling out a small, folded photo crease down the middle from being carried around often. She placed it gently on his desk. "That's me and Mommy, last Thanksgiving." "She's not good with selfies." He looked. The woman in the photo older, tired, but unmistakably her smiled with a softness that punched the breath out of his lungs. Her auburn hair now streaked with gray, her arms wrapped protectively around her daughter. Her eyes tired but burning with love. He swallowed. There was no longer a question. Not in his mind. Not in his gut. It wasn't just resemblance. It was recognition. He remembered the curve of that smile, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she laughed, the scar above her left eyebrow when she fell off a bicycle the same summer. They'd first kissed outside a rooftop party, and now that face was staring back at him from a daughter he didn't know he had. His throat burned. He stood up to fast, needing space. He moved toward the glass wall of his office, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the city, but not seeing it at all. Emma's voice came softly behind him. "Mr. Reynolds, are you going to hire my mom?" He didn't answer, not right away. Instead, he closed his eyes and fought a war inside his chest. A man of control, of strategy, of precision, but this was chaos, raw and human, messy and alive, and it was his. He turned slowly. Emma looked so small in that enormous leather chair, legs swinging, hair ribbon slightly lopsided now. And yet, her presence filled the room. "I don't think this is just about a job anymore," he said, more to himself than to her. Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" He walked back toward the desk and sat down carefully, his movements more fragile than they had ever been in a boardroom. "I mean," he paused, breath catching, "I think your mother and I have some unfinished business." Emma tilted her head again, brows scrunched. "Like emails you forgot to send." He actually laughed just once. It cracked the ice in his tone for the first time in years. "No." Bigger than a male's. The phone on his desk buzzed, but he ignored it. Nothing else mattered right now. Not mergers, not numbers, not board meetings, only this girl. And the truth unraveling like a thread that had been pulled 7 years ago and finally snapped. "Emma," he said gently, "can I ask you something important?" She nodded. "What's your birthday?" She told him, and the number slammed into his chest like a car crash. He didn't breathe. Couldn't. Because the math added up. Because he knew exactly where he had been 9 months before that. And because now finally he knew exactly where she had gone. Emma watched him curiously, sensing something but not understanding what. Not yet. But she would. They both would. Because the truth wasn't just coming. It had arrived. And it had a name. Emma Harrison. Alexander Reynolds didn't remember standing up. 1 second. He was staring at Emma's face, those eyes, unmistakable now and the next. He was across the room again, gripping the edge of the window frame like it might anchor him to the moment. Outside, the skyline glittered, pretending life was normal, pretending his world hadn't just shifted beneath his feet, behind him. The little girl waited quiet, patient, like she knew that whatever was unraveling in him needed to finish on its own. But she watched him, not with fear, with curiosity, as if she were still trying to figure him out. He suddenly realized how much she was like Rebecca. That same unnerving calm under pressure. That same way of watching people, like she was listening to more than just what they said. Like she could see through the noise, down to the truth beneath it. And now that truth had come full circle. He turned, slowly. "Emma," he said, his voice unsteady for the first time in years. "When your mom talks about your dad, does she ever say his name?" She shrugged, pulling at the sleeve of her cardigan. "No. I asked once, when I was 5. She said it didn't matter who he was, only who I become." The words hit like a slap. He felt them in his gut, sharp and humbling. That was so Rebecca, pride wrapped in pain. She never told Emma, never chased him down, never asked for anything. Not even when he had climbed his way to the top of Chicago's business world. She could have used his name, catching his success, demanded help. She didn't. She raised Emma alone, quietly, fiercely, like a warrior no one saw coming, and he hadn't even known. Alexander sat down again, but this time the leather of his chair felt too soft, too undeserved. He rubbed his face, dragging a hand through his hair like it might loosen the noose of guilt tightening around his neck. "Emma," he said slowly, "I think your mom didn't just leave this company. I think she left me." Emma tilted her head. "Were you the coffee man?" He blinked, then let out a small, broken laugh. Yeah, I was. He paused, and I think I might be your dad. She stared at him, not with shock, not with fear, just silence. She blinked slowly, like the idea was something she was sorting through, measuring piece by piece. Then, with the terrifying clarity only children possess, she said, "That's what Mommy meant." When she said not to be mad at him, that he made a hard choice, but he wasn't mean. Alexander felt the back of his throat burn. She never told me, he whispered. I didn't know. She said you were chasing your dream. She didn't want to stop you. His chest cracked open like something inside had been waiting for permission to break. Rebecca hadn't been hiding out of spite. She was protecting him, shielding Emma from becoming some side story in a powerful man's life. She had chosen dignity, and he'd been to blind, to driven, to obsessed with becoming someone, to realize he had left someone behind. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice soft. Emma, I don't know what your mom told you about me, but if I really am your dad, I don't want to be a stranger anymore. She steadied him. You're not what I imagined. That made him flinch, in a good way or a bad way. He asked. Emma's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. You're trying. That's a start. And somehow, those simple words shattered him more than any accusation ever could. Just then, there was a soft knock at the office door. It opened before Alexander could answer. Diane stepped in, clutching her tablet. Sir, I didn't want to interrupt, but the hospital just called. He shot up. What? Why? She listed you as an emergency contact. They said her condition worsened. They've been trying to reach someone all morning. Emma's smile vanished. Alexander's mind went blank, then snapped into action. Tell them I'm on my way. Clear my schedule. Everything. Cancel the board meeting. Diane blinked. All of it. All of it. He snapped. Then, gentler. Emma, come with me. She nodded, already grabbing her backpack. No hesitation, no questions. They moved together through the corridors of Power Alexander Reynolds. Once untouchable, now just a man chasing the pieces of a life he didn't know he lost. Behind them, the glass and steel empire he built glistened with perfection. But in front of them, in a hospital down the street, lay the one woman who'd given him a second chance without ever asking for one, and for the first time in his adult life, Alexander Reynolds was afraid, not of failure, but of being delayed. And as the elevator doors slid shut behind them, he realized power couldn't fix this. Money couldn't buy it back, but maybe just maybe love could still save. What mattered most? Asked checked. The hospital corridors buzzed with the soft chaos of urgency flashing monitors, the low beeping of machines, the murmurs of nurses pushing carts and wheeling for poles down scuffed linoleum. The overhead lights hummed faintly, throwing long shadows across pale green walls. Somewhere, a child cried. Somewhere else, someone flatlined. Alexander Reynolds moved through it like a ghost, but not unseen. The receptionist at the desk had looked up and done a double take. Everyone knew who he was. He'd funded a new research wing 2 years ago. A framed photo of him shaking hands with the hospital director still hung in the lobby. But today, he didn't come to shake hands. He came to find her. Emma clung to his side, one hand gripping his jacket sleeve as they walked past rows of waiting chairs and worn posters about flu shots and organ donation. Her usual composure was crumbling now. Her lower lip trembled. Her shoe scuffed quietly against the tile. Room for 112. That's where they said she was. Alexander hesitated just outside the door. It was slightly ajar, the fluorescent light inside casting a sterile beam into the hallway. He could hear a soft rhythm, the mechanical hiss of a breathing machine. For a moment, he couldn't move. He had faced Fortune 500 takeovers, dismantled rival empires, fired entire departments with a glance. But this was Rebecca. He pushed. The door opened. There she was, pale, still, tubes in her arms, oxygen line under her nose. The woman who once danced barefoot in his first apartment kitchen to a half-broken radio. The woman who once fixed his necktie before his first ever investor pitch. The woman who had loved him silently and walked away carrying a truth he'd never earned the right to hear. And now she lay there, unconscious, her chest rising and falling with a mechanical rhythm that felt borrowed from time itself. He took one shaky step forward, then another. Emma walked past him without hesitation and climbed onto the chair beside the bed. She reached out and gently held her mother's hand. small fingers wrapping around Rebecca's limp wrist. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "I came. I told him. I did what you said." Alexander approached slowly, stopping at the foot of the bed. For the first time in over a decade, the man who ran cities couldn't find a single word. His eyes traced her features, older now, yes, worn by years of doing it all alone, but still her. Still Rebecca Dot, and suddenly the years he'd spent chasing status, building towers, forging billion-dollar contracts, all of it felt hollow. Empty. Because what had it all been for, if it meant missing this? "Rebecca," he said, voice raw, I didn't know, and I should have. You gave me the one thing that mattered, and you didn't ask me for anything, not even once." He blinked back the sting of tears. "I thought I was chasing success, but the truth is I was running from a life I didn't have the courage to face. From you, from responsibility, from love." A soft knock came from the door. A nurse stepped inside quietly, holding the clipboard. "You're Mr. Reynolds." He nodded. "She's stable now, but there's been respiratory distress. If the medication doesn't hold, there's a risk of coma." Emma looked up sharply. "What's that mean?" The nurse knelt beside her, gently. "It means your mom might sleep for a long time, without waking up." Alexander's heart stuttered. The nurse glanced at him. "If she listed you as an emergency contact, you may be the only one who can authorize treatment escalation. We'll need a decision soon." He nodded numbly. "Do whatever it takes. I'll cover it." "No," Emma said suddenly. She stood up, fierce. "You don't get to just pay for it and walk away." Alexander blinked. "What?" She stepped forward. Her voice shook, but her words cut like glass. "She didn't need your money. She needed you. All those birthdays, she baked cakes by herself. When I was sick, she stayed up all night. When I asked who my dad was, she said he was someone chasing his dream man, and she hoped one day he'd come back a better man." Emma's voice cracked, tears finally spilling. "So don't you dare think you can fix this with a credit card." It was the first time anyone had ever spoken to him like that. And he didn't feel insulted. He felt seen. Broken open, shattered in the exact way he deserved. Alexander knelt down eye level with her. "You're right. I failed her, and I failed you, but I don't want to run anymore." Emma stared into his eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. Hope, thin and trembling, like the beep of the monitor beside Rebecca's bed. The nurse gently excused herself, leaving them in silence. Alexander stood and looked down at the woman in the bed. "Come back, Rebecca," he whispered. "Please, I don't want to do this without you. Not anymore." And then her fingers moved, just barely, but enough. Emma gasped. Alexander reached down, grabbing her hand gently. Rebecca's eyelids fluttered. Time froze. And for the first time in 7 years, Alexander Reynolds prayed not as a CEO, not as a powerful man, but as a father, and maybe, just maybe, as a man finally ready to love. The hospital room was still, the kind of stillness that feels sacred, not lifeless, just suspended, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Rebecca's eyes fluttered open like a soft breeze brushing across a field long untouched. She blinked against the ceiling light, her breath shallow, confused. Her gaze drifted to the wires, to the floor, to the machine counting her every inhale like time was rationed. Then she saw them. Emma curled in the visitor's chair, asleep, her cheek pressed against her mother's arm. And beside her, him. Alexander. Seated, silent, his hands clasped, elbows on his knees, head bowed like a man in mourning or prayer. Her breath hitched. She remembered the hospital lights, the tightness in her lungs, the oxygen mask, then nothing. But now here he was, not on a screen, not in a press release, not in some unattainable boardroom skyline. Here. In her hospital room. Older, sharper, yet softer than she remembered. "Alex," she croaked. His head snapped up, eyes wide. "Rebecca." She looked at him for a long moment. There was no anger in her gaze, just exhaustion, surprise, and something older than both. Quiet heartbreak. You found out?" she asked. He stood slowly, his hands shaking slightly. "Emma came to your interview. She what?" He gave a choked laugh. "Portfolio, resume, the whole act. She even wore a cardigan." Rebecca closed her eyes. "I told her not to. She said you couldn't breathe, that you needed this job." She stood in my lobby like she was about to pitch to the board of directors. He stepped closer, She reminded me of someone I used to know, someone fearless. Rebecca opened her eyes again. She reminded you of me. He nodded, gently. She's incredible. There was a pause. Rebecca's eyes searched his face. And now what? She whispered. You finally found out. You have your life, your empire. What are you going to do with this truth, Alexander? He walked to the edge of the bed, knelt, and took her hand in his. It was warm now, not strong, but present. I'm not here to take her away, he said, voice trembling. I'm not here to fix this with money or contracts. I'm here because I missed 7 years of her life. 7 years I'll never get back. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I came here because I needed to say this in front of both of you. She watched him, unsure. I left you, he continued. Before I even knew I was leaving more than just a relationship. I didn't ask questions. I didn't care enough to wonder why you disappeared. I told myself you were part of my past, and I sprinted into a future that never felt whole. He took a breath. I was chasing success, and I ran right past the one thing that would have made all of it mean something. Rebecca's throat clenched. Why now? Because she walked into my life and broke it open with crayons and courage, he said, glancing at Emma. And because if I let you go again, I won't survive it. She looked at him, long and hard. You're not the man I remember. He nodded. Good. He wasn't enough. Silence. Then Emma stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at her mother, then Alexander. You're both here, she mumbled, still groggy. Rebecca smiled weakly. We are. Baby Emma looked from one face to the other. Are we a family now? The question hung in the room like thunder. Before a storm, Alexander looked to Rebecca, not pleading, not pressuring, just hoping. And Rebecca, she thought about every night spent alone on the kitchen floor crying silently so Emma wouldn't hear. Every holiday she smiled through, every job interview where she wasn't hired because she was a single mother with a complicated schedule, and still she'd never let bitterness take root. Now, the man she loved once, who left, who rose, who broke her heart, was sitting here, not as a CEO, but as a man finally brave enough to stay. She reached for his hand again, and laced her fingers through his. Let's see where this goes, she said softly. Emma beamed. Alexander's eyes welled with tears, but he didn't look away. In that tiny hospital room, something healed. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Outside, the city roared on. The towers, the cars, the schedules, the endless race. But inside, a little girl had rewritten fate with nothing but love, faith, and a worn leather portfolio. And the man, who once thought he had everything, realized he was just now beginning to understand what everything really meant. Not power. Not profit, but people. Family. And a second chance.